What was supposed to be a routine rescue mission quickly turns into a nightmare, one that changes So-Yul's life forever. So-Yul, a D-rank rescue hunter working under the Bureau of Hunters, specializes in locating trapped hunters inside dangerous dungeons. On one mission, he and his team enter a dungeon expecting a standard extraction, but things take a deadly turn when ghouls block their escape. Using his search ability, So-Yul finds an alternative route, only to lead them into even more dangerous territory filled with deadly monsters. As the team gets overwhelmed, So-Yul realizes a necromancer is controlling everything behind the scenes. In a desperate move, he sacrifices himself by pushing his teammates out of a magic circle, trapping himself behind to ensure their survival. Left alone, he faces the dungeon boss, who attempts to turn him into a ghoul. At the brink of defeat, So-Yul uses his final strength to search for a way out and discovers a mysterious monument offering a hidden class called Architect of Labyrinth. With nothing left to lose, he accepts and is transported into a tutorial labyrinth where he realizes that he has undergone a rare reawakening and must now survive to claim his new power. So-Yul begins clearing the labyrinth and soon levels up until the system informs him that he has 4 ghouls remaining with only 30 minutes to finish the task. This makes him note that he must work faster. The tutorial was going smoothly, and he effortlessly took a weapon from one of the fallen monsters. After which, he utilized his mapping skills to track and wipe out most of the monsters. It was basically a breeze-through, and So-Yul was sure he could finish up within the required time. However, everything changed when a giant monster started chasing him, but he was still confident he could handle it because, unlike the smaller fries, this one traveled alone. Since it would take up more time and effort to defeat, So-Yul decided to take out all the smaller monsters before using the remaining time to handle the giant monster. Before he could continue the hunt, one of the smaller ones approached him, making it even easier for him. But just as So-Yul is about to finish it, the giant monster appears out of nowhere along with the remaining 3 smaller ghouls. This surprises So-Yul because he didn't even sense them moving as a group. This is because he hadn't checked the map properly due to his limited time, which landed him in this epic mess. As he calms his nerves to plan his next strategy, So-Yul realizes he can only handle 2 ghouls at once. So he takes down one and decides to plan, but the major problem is that he's surrounded, meaning the best way out is to break right through them. However, after calculating every possible move like a chess piece, he quickly realizes that he's in checkmate. So-Yul's determination begins to falter as his inferiority for being a measly D-rank hunter starts to eat into his mind. But as the monsters lunge towards him, So-Yul refuses to give up, no matter how at a disadvantage he is. He reminds himself that this is just a tutorial designed for his gain, so he shouts at the system to act like a proper servant and help him figure a way out since he didn't accept this task just to be ghoul chow. Just then, So-Yul's 6th sense skill activates, and as he prepares to take on the monsters, the system notifies him of a new option. It tells So-Yul that he can spin blocks by linking the 6th sense skill with the map function. Once the skill is linked to the map, the system notifies him several times to use the spin block skill through the map. So-Yul then spins the block on the map and realizes that he can now spin the walls in the dungeon to reposition them. Before the monsters can claw at him, he hits the spin function and traps them on another side of the block, leaving the ghouls confused. Left with only one monster, So-Yul is quite pleased with the effect of the new function. He then spins the block a few times to separate the monsters before hunting them down one by one, and before long, he takes down 3 of them. After that, So-Yul swoops in to effortlessly take down the giant monster. But reality hits him harder than he expected as the monster grabs him like a panini. However, So-Yul refuses to accept such a defeat, so like an overpowered boss he breaks free and with a single strike, defeats the giant ghoul. The system immediately announces the successful end of the tutorial and changes So-Yul's class to Labyrinth Architect. He is also given the King of the Labyrinth skill, meaning all the ghouls defeated will be included as part of his labyrinth monsters. The system then offers to return So-Yul to a safe area. Meanwhile, right outside the dungeon, Li-Han is still trying to go back for him, but his colleagues hold him back as they feel So-Yul might have been devoured. Besides, the gate of the dungeon has already vanished, so there's no way to go back for him. But to their utter shock, So-Yul strolls in eating popsicles and even offers them some to cool their short-circuited brains. So-Yul then clocks out from work and heads to the park, where he summons the sphere. It's a primary skill that lets him imprison opponents within the labyrinth from outside. Although the sphere can forcibly trap enemies, the system warns So-Yul that they can escape by defeating the labyrinth boss. Apart from that, he also learns that any enemy who defeats the boss will automatically become even stronger. So-Yul decides not to recklessly throw his opponents inside without thinking it through. He also notes that the sphere is invisible to others, which makes it easier to use. He then decides to find ways to fill the labyrinth with stronger monsters since it will come in handy for helping him face strong enemies in the future. But the only way to fill the labyrinth is to defeat monsters inside it and make them serve him by activating the King of the Labyrinth skill. So-yul knows that ultimately, he'll have to get stronger to defeat these monsters himself. While he's lost in thought, his neighbor's daughter, Yeonhee, arrives and hands him a bunch of apples from her mother. So-yul is surprised to receive that much from them, which makes him ask if it's okay. Yeonhee assures him that he can take them since they always have a bunch of leftovers from their store. As they head home, So-yul asks Yeonhee about school, and she tells him it's fine even though she's visibly uneasy. Suddenly they stop in their tracks when they hear a woman causing a commotion in front of a hotel. She frantically begs the police to let her pass through because her daughter is still trapped inside the hotel. Yeonhee studies the hotel closely, pointing out that it doesn't look like it's on fire. So-yul tells her that it's a dungeon break which happens when a gate is neglected for a long time. When this happens, the monsters inside break out into the real world. So-yul then gives Yeonhee the apples, promising to take them when he returns. Yeonhee asks him why, and he explains that he has to do his job as a hunter in the rescue department. But as So-yul tries to rush into the hotel, a policeman stops him. So-yul shows his identification card to prove that he's with the rescue department, but that doesn't make sense to the policeman, seeing that he's alone. So-yul explains that the others will arrive soon, but the man still stops him because the hotel is teeming with a pack of red goblins. However, So-yul insists on going alone, especially since he heard that a little girl is trapped inside. The policeman continues to reason with him, but So-yul brushes him off boldly because he knows he's not alone. As he heads inside, So-yul is disappointed with the Hanul Guild because they were in charge of clearing the gates in this area. No one pays attention to the dangers around because they trust the guilds to do their job, but these guilds ignore small gates because they aren't profitable enough, which sometimes results in a dungeon break leading to bloodshed. As soon as he enters the hotel, So-yul activates his sixth sense skill and senses the red goblins hiding in the shadows. He calls out for them, and like a swarm of flies they appear, charging straight towards him. So-yul immediately activates the sphere, sucking them all into the labyrinth. He then watches them from the palm of his hand like a boss, knowing that the old him would have been struggling to handle them. But as the king of the labyrinth, all he has to do is relax while his labyrinth monsters do the job for him. From the outside, So-yul watches as his minions chase a one-star red goblin who suddenly stops at the end of the hallway. Although these red cretins are ordinary species that revolve around their leader, they're much more cunning than regular goblins. Just as the ghoul thinks it has the upper hand, the cunning goblin grins wickedly as his other comrades appear from the shadows. But before they can pounce on the ghoul, So-yul slams a wall in their face, giving the ghoul an escape route. He then checks the condition of the labyrinth, only to discover that the goblins have been using their tricks to clear out his minions. So-yul notes that he must keep an eye on things since too many red goblins were sucked into the labyrinth. But even with all their cunning tricks, he assures them that they're only pawns on his chessboard while he's the game master. Afterwards, So-yul reaches the 17th floor where he finally finds the little girl Somi hiding. He assures her that she's safe, and as they head out, Somi asks him if he defeated all the goblins by himself. So-yul tells her he did, even though he knows the ghoul did most of the work. Despite that, it still counts as him doing it himself anyway. So-yul is glad he sucked them into the labyrinth because they were using their sense of smell to hunt humans. If he hadn't arrived in time, they would have found Somi in no time. Suddenly, the system blares, warning So-yul that more than 50% of his ghouls have been wiped out by the goblins. So-yul then helps Somi into the elevator alone, telling her that he needs to round up the remaining goblins. After sending her away, he checks the sphere and finds the main culprit, the Red Goblin King, single-handedly taking out a bunch of labyrinth ghouls. So-yul wonders whether to send him to the labyrinth boss, but immediately changes his mind. He fears that the Goblin King might actually defeat the boss and become too tough to handle. So he decides to enter the labyrinth and handle it himself. The moment he steps in, So-yul is surprised to see a bunch of ghoul corpses lying around. He then spins a few blocks through the map to stop the Goblin King from wreaking further havoc, after which he redirects him towards himself. As soon as the Goblin King shows up, he fiercely takes a swing at So-yul, vowing to finish him. But So-yul swiftly dodges the attacks without breaking a sweat. As he dodges the attacks, So-yul can feel the difference in his body and the level of his stats since his reawakening. One of the major reasons he came into the labyrinth is to test his new skills and maybe leave the rest to the ghouls. But seeing how much his skills have improved, So-yul is confident he can handle things on his own. As the Goblin King continues to attack him, So-yul stabs his weapon into the goblin's wrist, but it breaks free and strikes So-yul. However, So-yul maintains his stance and even thanks the goblin for knocking him backwards, as the damage on the goblin's hand has been done. So-yul then begins to taunt him because he can no longer use his hand again. Besides, he thanked the goblin earlier because he had a new trick up his sleeve that he wanted to test out. To push the goblin to the center where he wants him, So-yul continues to relentlessly taunt him for being weak and a waste of space. Unfortunately, the insults are too weak to move the goblin, so So-yul ups his game and it finally pays off. The Goblin King blows hot when So-yul asks him if he's a wuss. Infuriated, he immediately charges towards Seo-yul, vowing to murk him, but Seo-yul remains unmoved, looking forward to testing his investment. Before the Goblin King can get to him, Seo-yul activates a repulsion device which freezes the Goblin King in place. With a smug smile, Seo-yul bids him farewell and activates a spiked ceiling trap, which instantly crushes the goblin to pulp. Even though he spent 20 gold, which is about 2 million won, to install the trap, Seo-yul is quite pleased with his investment. In fact, the effect is so good that he starts feeling guilty for anyone who will be caught in it. Just then, the system informs him that he has leveled up again, and the Goblin Pack defeated using the King of Labyrinth skill has also been included in the labyrinth. Afterwards, Seo-yul heads out into the hotel where Li-han scolds him for going into the hotel alone. Li-han then asks him if he handled the goblins by himself, but Seo-yul feigns amnesia, claiming he hit his head. However, Li-han doesn't believe him since the police already informed him that the goblins vanished after Seo-yul went inside the hotel. But Seo-yul has no intentions of revealing anything, so he playfully tells Li-han to buy him meat in exchange for the truth. Suddenly, Seong-gun, the manager from the Hanul Guild, interrupts them, asking to speak with them. Li-han agrees, and first Seong-gun sincerely thanks them for helping the guild resolve the dungeon break, but Seo-yul and Li-han are disgusted that he made it seem like the guild participated in the cleanup. Seong-gun then asks them not to talk to reporters about the incident, as their guild doesn't want the public to know about it. He promises to compensate the hotel for damages, and warns that reporting negative news about their guild to the public might make people anxious. He also offers to make a generous donation to the rescue department as well. Even though Seo-yul is infuriated by this, he knows the painful truth is that the man is right. Unlike the Bureau of Hunters, who are mostly made up of measly D-rankers, guild hunters range up to S rank. Because of this, people trust the guild more and believe they're the ones with the power to protect them. But Seo-yul hates the fact that the guilds exploit this same trust to do whatever they want. Seo-yul is aware that he can't do anything about it, no matter how much he hates the system. Refusing to let it go like that, he pats Seong-gun on the shoulder with a little strength to intimidate him. Seo-yul gives him a weary smile and agrees to his request because he doesn't even want to publicize the incident to keep any unnecessary attention from himself. Seo-yul also knows that if he blows it up, the Hunters Association will just bury it. However, he refuses to let the Hanul Guild go unscathed, so he bluntly requests that 10 billion won be donated to the rescue team. Since they'll keep cleaning up the guild's messes, Seo-yul intends to bleed them dry. He presses on Seong-gun's shoulder, asking if he can match the offer. Seong-gun is surprised to hear this, but he can't even say anything because Seo-yul has already scared him into a code brown. After handling the dungeon break, Seo-yul is given a 2-day vacation, so he heads to the park to relax. He was quite proud that he was able to solve the problem without casualties and even managed to extort a lot of money from the Hanul Guild. The only downside is that his coworkers have been looking at him with a million questions on their faces because he took down a pack of red goblins alone. But Seo-yul doesn't want to tell them anything to avoid any unnecessary attention. If people were to learn about what he did, Seo-yul fears it might make headlines and draw attention from the guilds, so he decides to use his vacation to focus on maintaining the labyrinth. First, he calculates how much it would cost him to repair the damaged walls and respawn the monsters. The labyrinth doesn't have its own separate currency, so it uses the universal currency for hunters, which is gold. After the calculations, Seo-yul realizes it costs about 53 gold, which is insanely expensive. In real-world currency, 53 gold equals 5.3 million won, which is twice Seo-yul's monthly salary. Despite the outrageous cost, he still decides to do it since he already has about 80 gold in his wallet. Before Seo-yul can complete the process, Jung-hae, a member of the monitoring department, calls Seo-yul on the phone, making him irritated. He snappily tells her to get to the point because he's supposed to be on vacation. But Jung-hae fires back, pointing out that his idea of a vacation is probably chilling in the park. She then tells him to use his seeker skills to help her track someone. But suddenly the line falls silent, making Jung-hae realize that Seo-yul hung up on her. Jung-hae is utterly shocked and can't believe the nerves on him. Meanwhile, after hanging up, Seo-yul instantly forgets about it and goes back to thinking about his labyrinth. He decides to save some gold instead of respawning all the labyrinth monsters since he can step in to handle things himself from time to time. As he continues to deliberate on which plan works better, his phone starts ringing again, irritating him. Seo-yul picks up the call and barks at Jung-hae to track the person herself since it's the job of the monitoring department, but she begs him to save a damsel in distress and even offers to buy him beef. Seo-yul is not interested in playing Prince Charming, but the beef offer briefly entices him. To seal the deal, Jung-hae assures him that he'll agree once he hears the name of the person she wants him to track. Seo-yul then asks her who it is, and Jung-hae reveals that it's Taesan, which immediately piques his interest. Considering Taesan's caliber, Seo-yul wants to meet him once, so he excitedly agrees to Jung-hae's request. Shortly afterwards, he arrives at a spot to observe a bunch of old geezers playing Korean chess. Even though he had never met Taesan in person, Soyul was able to track his strong, dark red aura all the way there. This aura is only possessed by powerful awakeners, so they tend to stand out even from a distance. Soyul studies him more closely, wondering if he's truly the legendary Taesan because he looks like an ordinary, scrawny old geezer. Just then, Taesan's game partner catches Soyul staring and asks if he knows how to play Korean chess. Soyul says he can play a little, so the man asks him for advice on his next move. Soyul starts to give the old man advice, but before he can finish, his sixth sense activates, signaling danger. As Taesan moves to strike him with a chess piece, Soyul quickly dodges, causing it to hit a tree behind him. The other old men hurry off to take a few shots for the gram while Taesan scolds Soyul for being nosy, but the attack only confirms to Soyul that the man is really the same legendary Taesan he was asked to track. Taesan is one of the 5 S-rank hunters in Korea, and he's famous for turning anything in his hand into a deadly weapon. Before Taesan can make another move on Soyul, Jonghyea interrupts him. Taesan asks Soyul if he's from the monitoring department, but Soyul says he's a seeker from rescue. Taesan slightly praises his skills but calls him arrogant, and Soyul playfully accepts the compliment, hyping himself up some more. Jonghyea tells Taesan that she has been searching for him because the monitoring department trainees have gathered for his lecture. Taesan agrees to go back with her, and Jonghyea asks Soyul how he managed to track someone whom the whole monitoring department couldn't find. Soyul boastfully tells her that it's because he's quite capable. He then prepares to leave, but Taesan tells him to follow them as he wants to confirm if Soyul actually has any talent apart from his arrogant mouth. At the monitoring department trainee gathering, Taesan gives the audience a little demonstration. He tells them that every awakener has their own maximum capacity, which means a C-rank hunter can never escape being C-rank. However, he informs them that the system can be tweaked a bit depending on one's will. Since martial arts can't be measured by numbers, Taesan tells them that they can become stronger depending on their weapon expertise. While Taesan pumps up the crowd with his motivational speech, Soyul blanks out because all he wants is to go back to studying his labyrinth. Suddenly, Taesan barks at a dude named Siwoo standing beside Soyul, asking him how long he has been receiving his training. Siwoo answers that he has been training under Taesan for 4 months. Siwoo turns out to be one of the few B-rank hunters in the monitoring department. Taesan commends him for his talent and asks what he thinks is required to wield a sword. Siwoo answers with determination that overwhelming strength and understanding of one's skills are what is required. Taesan pauses for a while before throwing the question to Soyul. Instead of giving it a thought, Soyul casually tells him that the will to wield the weapon is what is required. A disdainful chatter erupts in the crowd because of his mindless answer, and everyone prefers Siwoo's response instead. They also point out that Soyul is not even a trainee of their department. Taesan then points out that Soyul answered too casually and asks him if he is sure about his answer. Soyul says he's certain and is impressed that Taesan was sharp enough to see through him. Taesan calls Soyul out for having a nonchalant attitude, but still announces that his answer is correct. However, Siwoo is not happy to hear this, and Soyul is even more puzzled, but he thanks Taesan. Siwoo angrily questions Taesan's decision and refuses to accept it because Soyul isn't even a trainee like him. Soyul is quite confused by Siwoo's childish outburst, while Taesan tells Siwoo that anyone with the qualifications can stand on the stage. He then announces that he'll be giving Soyul an equal chance like Siwoo to pass his test, and all they have to do is prove their respective answers. Siwoo accepts the challenge, but Soyul immediately rejects the offer. However, Taesan asks him to reconsider, telling him that he will take anyone who passes the test as a disciple. The thought of being the disciple of an S-rank powerhouse instantly piques Soyul's interest. Apart from learning how to become stronger, it's also a chance to rise to a higher position. Seeing that he has Soyul where he wants him, Taesan asks if he's tempted by the offer. Soyul hesitates for a second before decisively accepting Taesan's offer. Afterwards, they proceed to the test location, and Taesan tells them that they're to utilize the skill he will pass down to them to smash an ether stone. He promises to take as his disciple anyone who breaks off as much as possible from the stone. This is a very daunting task because the ether stone is a rare stone that can only be found in the temple. Because it's imbued with magic power, only powerful awakeners can break it. Soyul then starts wondering what Taesan means by passing down a skill, while Siwoo, determined to win the challenge, pumps up the crowd for their support. The crowd cheers for Siwoo, while Soyul makes up his mind to grab this opportunity no matter what happens. Taesan then prepares to pass down the skill, but he warns them that they will be automatically disqualified if they don't feel anything. As he begins to pass the skill to Soyul and Siwoo, a terrifying red aura hits them. Soyul's system instantly detects the aura, but before he can make sense of it, Taesan's aura almost sucks the breath out of him. However, he's determined to persist until the end to receive the skill. Just when he starts to lose consciousness, a sudden calmness hits Soyul as he sees the skill Taesan has passed down to him. A spear appears before him, and the system notifies him that he has acquired the Serene Mind skill. It also informs him that he has mastered the Dragon King's spearmanship. As Taesun notices Siwoo's and Soyul's expressions, he commends them for having the right aptitude to get the inheritance. Normally, other people don't feel anything, while others pass out before they can receive the skill. Afterwards, he asks the boys who wants to go first, and Siwoo immediately takes the lead. Siwoo is determined to blow everyone's mind away to keep Soyul from even having the mind to challenge him. As he prepares to take a swing at the stone, he curses Soyul under his breath, accusing him of buying his way with money. He can't understand how a useless D rank managed to withstand Taesun's skill inheritance. Determined to show his superiority, Siwoo uses every bit of his strength to hit the ether stone with his sword and chops off a large chunk of it. The crowd is amazed by Siwoo's power and feels his talent is being wasted in the monitoring department. Taesun notes that Siwoo has mastered the Dragon King's swordsmanship. After his demonstration, Siwoo taunts Soyul, telling him that he needs to know his place as a junior. But Soyul fires back at him for his inferiority complex and always feeling the need to prove himself. Before the roasting can get out of hand, Taesun tells the boys to cut it out and informs Soyul that it's his turn. Soyul then heads to the front, thinking he only responded to Siwoo because of his condescending tone. Though he knows that he's no match for Siwoo in terms of pure power, Soyul doesn't let it get to him, because he believes it's not about strength but willpower. This is a test to prove that his own answer is correct, and Taesun already confirmed it earlier. Even though he answered casually, Soyul is sure of his answer, so he stops to think about why his answer is the right one. The moment he remembers the rescue hunter who once saved him, Soyul finally finds his answer, and that is to become like him. Just like that hunter, Soyul became a rescue hunter to help people feel the hope he felt when he was rescued. To do this, he knows he must become stronger than he is currently. So with that thought in mind, Soyul pours everything into his spear, activating the Dragonfire Heartpiercer skill. He unleashes a massive flame that completely destroys the ether stone, leaving the crowd and even Siwoo completely stunned. As Soyul walks back to his position, he smugly apologizes to Siwoo, pointing out that a junior just stole his spot. Taesun commends Soyul for being able to unleash the true power of his weapon, as only someone who knows themselves can do that. Taesun declares that Soyul will be his disciple, and Soyul happily thanks him while the crowd cheers for him. Elsewhere, Yeonhee is cornered by a bunch of bullies led by their leader, a boy named Jintae. A blonde bully then taunts Yeonhee and says she ended up like that because she was a nosy Karen helping out a friend. Apparently, Yeonhee had slapped Jintae for bullying her friend, which only angered him. It only made things worse because her friend decided to send herself to the afterlife to escape the bullies. Jintae then mocks Yeonhee about the incident, reminding her that her friend is in the hospital fighting for her life. Yeonhee is enraged and glares at him, but this only excites Jintae more. He immediately slaps her, but before he can continue, a B-rank hunter interrupts him. Jintae then tells his friends that they're leaving and warns them to make sure Yeonhee doesn't escape. He also tells the hunter to follow them because he called him to take them somewhere empty so that they can play with Yeonhee to their heart's content. Meanwhile, as Yeonghye walks Soyul back to his workplace, she commends him for becoming the disciple of an S-rank hunter. It turns out Taesun had asked him to choose a weapon, and he picked a spear. Junghae is skeptical about his choice, but Soyul tells her that it's perfect. Because to her, it's just an ordinary spear, but his system already detected that it's a spear of evolution called Loga. The spear can evolve into different forms, matching the user's will. As soon as they arrive, Junghae complains that it's way past her clock-out time. Soyul mocks her for being tired despite doing nothing all day at the monitoring department. This infuriates Junghae, and she tries to pounce on him, but Soyul pushes her back with one hand while noticing a commotion in front. A tired-looking woman tries to convince the security guard to let her see Soyul, but the guard stops her from entering. He tells her to call him, but the woman says she already did. But Soyul didn't answer. Just then, Soyul interrupts their bickering, asking her what's wrong. The woman then grabs his shirt and her voice breaks as she tells him that Yeonhee was dragged to the yellow belt, revealing that she's Yeonhee's mother. This immediately upsets Soyul, and he asks her who did it. Inside the yellow belt, one of Jintae's minions asks him if it's okay for them to be in such a dangerous place. Jintae assures them that it's safe since they also brought a B-rank hunter for security. He proudly declares that he wants to check who will win if Yeonhee fights a monster. Seeing how scared Yeonhee looks, Jintae taunts her more, assuring her that the yellow belt monsters are weaker. Scared out of her mind, Yeonhee immediately bolts because she's sure Jintae is insane enough to force her into a fight with a monster. Yeonhee races forward, determined to somehow escape this lunatic, but before she can make a successful prison break, Jintae orders the hunter to stop her. The hunter immediately uses his leg to trip Yeonhee, causing her to fall. Yeonhee calls out for help at the top of her lungs, but Blondie tells her to save her breath and lets her know that it's useless since they're the only ones there. The hunter then senses something watching them from the shadows and tells everyone to step back, But because Jintai already said that the monsters there are weak, Blondie disobeys his orders and becomes the first dumb one to die. The hunter quickly rushes forward to block the remaining stingers, while Jintai is terrified when he sees the Blondie's lifeless body. The hunter then tells him to run back the way they came. However, Jintai is too scared to move and asks the hunter who attacked them. The hunter tells him that they're stinghawks, a large kind of monster hornet. Meanwhile, Seoyul has already made his way into the yellow belt, and he calls to thank Jungmin who helped him out. Jungmin is a member of the combat class, and he was the one who first tracked Yeonhee's whereabouts. Seoyul thanks him for that, but Jungmin says he was only responding to a missing persons report. Even though he warned Seoyul against going in alone, Jungmin still tells him to be careful, but Seoyul isn't too worried about his safety. After the call, Seoyul looks around the now miserable yellow belt, but it wasn't always like that. The yellow belt was sealed off after the area became uncontrollable due to a dungeon break. Though the monsters in this zone aren't strong, they're much more cunning, making them difficult to deal with. Seoyul confirms this because he has taken out a few of them upon entering. He notes that they seem weaker, but still it'll be hard for someone like Yeonhee, who hasn't awakened, to survive them. So he hurries off to search for her, but soon the hornets start attacking him again. But instead of fighting them himself, Seoyul prepares to send them into the labyrinth because he's running out of time. He tells them to call the rest of their friends, but when they actually arrive, he's a bit uneasy because of their large number. As they begin their sting operation, Seoyul runs for his dear life only to be cornered by the hornets. Despite sending a large number inside the sphere, they continue to appear, making him realize he might be in deeper trouble than he imagined. This is because the number of monsters inside the labyrinth is depleting rapidly, so if he forces in any more hornets, the labyrinth might actually collapse. Apart from that, Seoyul knows he can't handle the ones outside alone either, so he decides to do something drastic. He sucks up all the hornets outside into the sphere before forcefully emptying a huge pond into the labyrinth, just as the hornets are about to completely colonize the labyrinth. They freeze as they sense something rushing in. But before they can do anything, a large stream of water rushes into the labyrinth, completely drowning them. Seoyul's heart aches as he watches the damage inside his precious little kingdom because he knows it will cost him an arm and a leg to repair it. The cost is exactly why he was hesitating to use this method in the first place. However, he's glad that it did the job and cleared the hornets chasing him outside. Elsewhere, Jintai and his group are still trying to survive a temple run, and Jintai is beginning to lose his patience with his useless B-rank hunter. The hunter tells him that the bugs are too much for him to handle alone, but that only pisses Jintai off more. They already lost their way out, and now he's stuck with a spineless so-called B-rank hunter. And to make matters worse, Jintai's second minion, with his little Red Riding Hood vibe, is soon impaled by the hornet stingers. It is at this very moment that Jintai realized he had messed up majorly by coming into the yellow belt just for the sake of having fun. As the hornets surround them, the hunter handles the ones behind while Jintai runs his mouth, telling him to take care of the front too. As one of the hornets charges towards them, Jintai, like every stupid, selfish menace, grabs Yeonhee to use her as his shield. Luckily, someone strikes the hornet down before it can harm Yeonhee, leaving them puzzled. Instead of being grateful, Jintai barks into the shadows, asking who it is. Irritated by his tone, Seoyul appears and introduces himself as a bureau hunter. He then angrily asks Jintai if he's the one who dragged Yeonhee inside the yellow belt. Yeonhee is already emotional when she realizes that Seoyul came to her rescue and rushes into his arms. He then asks if she's okay, pointing out that it's the first time he has seen her cry. Jintai soon interrupts their reunion and offers to pay Seoyul any amount in exchange for showing him the exit to the yellow belt. Yeonhee tells Seoyul to ignore the piece of trash, but Seoyul ignores her as his face suddenly turns dark. He then apologizes to her, but before Yeonhee can ask why, Seoyul knocks her out. Seoyul gently places Yeonhee on the ground and promises to get home after cleaning up the waste. Shocked, Jintai asks him what he's doing, and Seoyul tells him that he's about to do something that he doesn't want Yeonhee to witness. He then slams his spear into the ground to stretch his fist for what's to come. But Jintai, who is too dumb to know he's in soup, continues to mouth off. He pulls the classic "Do you know who I am" card, but to his surprise, Seoyul tells him that his face is one that is quite famous amongst bureau hunters. Seoyul then reveals that Jintai is the son of Bum-jin, a judge of the Supreme Court of Justice. Apparently, Jintai is infamous for bullying, theft, and all sorts of crazy crimes, but thanks to his father's influence and money, he always manages to pay his way out every single time. Seeing that Seoyul has already heard about his scores, Jintai thinks he can intimidate him, so he fearlessly faces Seoyul, asking what he wants to do about it. Seoyul simply kicks him in the shin, and Jintai's brain buffers for a second before he finally collapses to the ground from the pain. However, Seoyul refuses to give him a moment to catch his breath as he immediately starts using him as a punching bag. He tells Jintai to try and pay him off since that's his major guilty pleasure. Seo-yul beats up a couple of times more, but before he can continue, the hunter steps in. He takes a swing at Seo-yul, but Seo-yul swiftly dodges it and lets Jintae go, seeing that his bodyguard is done taking care of the hornets in the area. At the same time, Jintae is ecstatic and begins mouthing off again because he's so sure that his useless hunter, who couldn't even handle a bunch of weak hornets, will definitely deal with a mere D-rank bureau hunter. Unfortunately, Seo-yul moves at lightning speed, dodging every attack the hunter throws at him. At the same time, Seo-yul is already pissed because he planned to let them off with a warning. But with the hunter trying to murk him, he decides to finish them off completely and chalk it up to self-defense. As they continue to fight, Seo-yul pulls out all the big guns that even the hunter is left puzzled because bureau hunters are supposed to be D-rank. However, Seo-yul's strength somehow seems to surpass his own, making him question everything he knows about ranks. At some point, he even starts suspecting that Seo-yul might not be a bureau hunter as he claims. Despite that, the hunter feels he can gain the upper hand since Seo-yul's weapon is just a spear. He decides to close the distance between them, convinced that if he can do that, he would be able to cut him down. Unfortunately, reality isn't as he imagined because the moment he finally gets close enough, Seo-yul grabs his hand as if waiting for him all along. Seo-yul then punches him straight in the face, giving him a much-needed facelift, which instantly knocks the hunter out. Jintae is horrified by the sight as he frantically calls him to get back to protecting him. Unfortunately for him, the hunter's spirit has already gone on a vacation, making Jintae question whether he's a Nippo B ranker. It is at this point that Seo-yul realizes he just effortlessly took out a B-rank hunter. He notes that it must be because of the stats he gained from defeating those hornets earlier, so his strength might have surpassed the level of a B-rank hunter. Seo-yul smirks at the thought, which only annoys Jintae, so he decides to stop being a wuss. He picks up a stone, foolishly hoping he can do what a whole B-rank hunter couldn't do. As he rushes forward, Seo-yul is a bit puzzled, but remains calm, and with only a light swing of his spear, he knocks Jintae down. Seo-yul then asks him how it feels to be the one at the receiving end of the stick. He tells Jintae that his victim suffered even more than this, but Jintae remains unrepentant and tells Seo-yul to suck it up since he neither has money nor power because that's how the world works. Seeing that the punk hasn't learnt anything, Seo-yul decides that the world would be a better place without a hopeless piece of trash like Jintae. This makes Jintae a bit scared, but Seo-yul doesn't plan on raising a finger against him. He simply picks up Yeonhee and tells Jintae that he'll be leaving him to the hungry ones in the yellow belt. Before Jintae knows what's happening, a bunch of sinister eyes appear from the shadows and soon a pack of monster wolves emerges. Jintae frantically barks at them to back off, hoping that the universe will somehow give him the power to control animals. But that doesn't happen as the wolves pounce on him, while Seo-yul quietly leaves with Yeonhee in his arms. After leaving the yellow belt, Yeonhee was reunited with her family amidst some touching waterworks. Jungmin informs Seo-yul that the officials who helped Jintae enter the yellow belt were apprehended and purged from their offices in the athlete department. He also speculates that things might get a little hectic in the city for a while. And just as he predicted, the incident caused widespread outrage as the officials were being disciplined. Even Jintae's father came under fire and had to resign from his position in the Supreme Court of Justice to completely settle the matter. After the incident, Seo-yul receives a quest request from the system to hunt the Queen Hornet in the yellow belt within 30 days. On successful completion of the mission, he learns that he will be awarded a Stinger Dagger, 100 gold, and a Queen's Scepter's Royal Jelly. However, the penalty for failing the quest is that he will lose 50% of his performance against insect-type monsters. Seo-yul recalls that he briefly saw the Queen Hornet on his way out of the yellow belt. Even though he knows that she's not an easy target since she's protected by her swarm, Seo-yul is still excited for the quest. He notes that the Queen must be quite powerful because her workers almost destroyed his labyrinth. Afterwards, Seo-yul tells Lee-han that he's leaving early as he has somewhere else to be, but when Lee-han asks if he completed all his paperwork, Seo-yul freezes for a split second before practically vanishing. Since he has 1 month until the Queen Hornet's quest expires, Seo-yul reasons that he needs to prepare himself because the swarm, which has depleted, will rapidly expand its territory again. Seo-yul soon arrives at a temple where Taesun tells him that he's late and orders him to enter because he plans to start Seo-yul's training immediately. Upon entering and changing into the dojo uniform, Seo-yul finally digests the fact that he is Taesun's disciple, but the old man tells him not to ride on this fact because there are still 2 other disciples above him. In addition, the amount of training he is going to engage in is going to choke him. Taesun leads Seo-yul into the training room, where he meets one of Taesun's senior disciples, Gyun-soo. Sitting in the room is the jawbone of an iron monster, which is a unique variant that exists nowhere else in the world. With the battle scars all over his back, Taesun admits that the monster was the first thing that almost sent him to the afterlife. Taesun walks to the jawbone and tells Seo-yul that this will be his first task. Taesun grabs the handles that have been placed on the jawbones, and he pulls them apart with immense strength. After showcasing what needs to be done, He lets go of the jawbone while admitting that the jawbone is as stubborn as ever. Gunsu claps for his master, commending him for always being the incredible man that he is. At the same time, Seo-yul is blown away by the muscles on the man and how ripped he is. Taesun then tells Seo-yul to try what he just did, and he agrees. He walks over to the jawbone, thinking about how he is currently above a B-rank hunter and he might not be able to pull it wide open like Taesun, but he plans to move it. However, Seo-yul couldn't even move the jawbone open, and Taesun is even more surprised that the jawbone didn't move. Seo-yul doesn't want to believe this as he continues struggling with the jawbone, and Taesun tells him that the training will build his physical strength, so he should just continue at it until he succeeds. As Taesun leaves, he tells Seo-yul that there will be no next stage until he pries the jaw open. Deep down, Gunsu is not impressed too, and he concludes that Seo-yul is just a nepo baby. The next day, as Gunsu makes his way to the training hall, he realizes that he has worked harder for the past 2 years than anyone to prove that he is worthy of being a direct disciple. But in the end, Seo-yul ends up being the one who gets his spot. Gunsu is not happy that it is not a B-rank like him who gets it, but some random dude from the bureau. Because of how much he has worked, Gunsu doesn't think it is fair that he got sidelined. He steps into the training hall and, to his surprise, he finds out that Seo-yul is already in the hall, cleaning. He greets Seo-yul with a tense voice, and Seo-yul urges him to speak more comfortably with him, telling him that he is the rookie. Gunsu replies that he might be okay with that, but he is not, and he looks around to see how clean and sparkling the gym is. He is blown away by this, and he asks him if he cleaned the gym himself, and he replies that he did. Gunsu walks off, urging Seo-yul not to do it again because it makes the rest of them look bad when the direct disciple is doing chores. Seo-yul is taken aback and he asks Gunsu if there really needs to be a hierarchy for things like this. Seo-yul tells him that he had the time on his hands and he just decided to do it. He believes that being a direct disciple doesn't mean he is going to dump his work on others, since they are all there to get stronger. Gunsu stares at Seo-yul and cannot believe just how annoying he is. Gunsu watches as Seo-yul continues coming to training for the next 2 weeks and even stays later than anyone else just to train. Gunsu realizes that, despite being the direct disciple, he never once threw his weight around or looked down on anybody. Gunsu basically trains like his life depends on it, while getting along with everyone else. Gunsu finds no fault in him, and this pisses him off even more because he is exactly the kind of person he would like to be. Sometime later, Seo-yul almost succeeds in pulling the jaw open, but he fails yet again. His hands have bled all over the jaw handle from grabbing it all the time, and just then, Gunsu walks over to give him a bottle of water. Surprisingly, Gunsu tells him not to overdo it, and Seo-yul is surprised that he finally dropped the formalities. Seo-yul takes the bottle from him, and he is still drinking when they hear a loud horn in the distance. Seo-yul asks him what this is, and Gunsu mentions that it is the deployment signal for the Overcross Guild. Apparently, the Overcross Guild was heading into a nearby dungeon that day. Seo-yul is surprised that the guild is operating at that hour, and Gunsu mentions that Overcross actually works 24/7. Seo-yul is surprised that Gunsu knows this, and Gunsu reveals that he had worked for Overcross briefly. The following morning, the Overcross Guild steps out of the dungeon after a successful mission to capture a steel-blood orc. One of the hunters asks his colleagues if it is actually legal for them to poach monsters this way, and he replies that, in the real form of things, they are not allowed to. However, the orc that they just captured would go for at least 12 billion won on the black market. He tells them that they pay their salaries using things like this. One of them has the orc necklace with him, and the moment the orc sees this, he is already losing his mind. The two idiots start making fun of the necklace and even decide to throw it away, but this only gets the orc really crazy. Elsewhere, Seo-yul and his team just finished a rescue mission, and he is about to leave for the association. His team leader reminds him of the team dinner, but he replies that he is not available because his master tells him to look after the rest of the disciples since he is away. Suddenly, the emergency alarm goes off, requesting support because a 3-star boss monster that was being transported illegally has broken loose and is currently on a rampage. Surprisingly, the incident is taking place at the Korean Martial Arts Association. At the association, the orc is already causing a rampage, destroying everything in its path, leaving Gunsu totally battered and helpless. Gunsu has a reflection of everything that has happened so far, and the fact that he has always considered himself to be a genius. He also believed that it was right for them to exploit sub-guilds because it was the right of the strong. However, it was the day that he got abandoned and left to die by his own men that he realized just how wrong he was. He realizes that he was just another replaceable cog in the machine. Gunsu also realizes that the world is a really cruel and rotten place. Nonetheless, he believes that there are still good people in the world because he was saved by someone, and he is trying to live up to that person's standard by making the world a little bit better. Gunsu gets back on his feet instead of giving up in front of the orc, and he screams at him, telling him that everything he has gone through has pushed him to survive 2 years in that hellhole. Gunsu points his half-blade at the orc, even though it is tough for him to move. Nonetheless, he figures out that he has to hold out as long as the orc is focused on him so that the other disciples can escape. Just then, the orc throws a punch at him and Gunsu is just too tired to move. He is already picturing his head flying over his neck when Seo-yul shows up to block the punch while commending Gunsu, telling him that he's done enough. Seo-yul urges Gunsu to leave the rest to him, and he activates the labyrinth, dragging the orc in there. The moment they arrive in the labyrinth, the orc doesn't even waste time as he chases Seo-yul around. Seo-yul doesn't expect the orc to be that aggressive and monstrous. He can't even believe that the orc just finished fighting the Overcross Guild, and it still has that much energy in him. The orc chases Seo-yul through the labyrinth halls as if he were taking his girlfriend while crashing the walls around him. Seo-yul finally comes to a halt, and he admits that he can't take on the orc alone, so he needs support. Seo-yul immediately releases the red goblins to surround the orc. They lunge at him, trying to overpower him, while Seo-yul looks for an opening. However, the orc is so strong that he is tearing into the goblins like paper. Seo-yul watches as his minions are getting shredded by the monstrous orc. Seo-yul is pissed at how much damage the orc is doing to his labyrinth walls when he went through a lot to fix them. He realizes that the goblins won't be enough to create the opening that he wants, and even though he didn't want to use his high monster because of the risk, he realizes that he has no choice at this point. Seo-yul then summons the labyrinth boss Kaori, who engages the orc in a fierce fight. Kaori struggles against the orc, but this gives Seo-yul the time to lunge toward the orc's head. He pushes his spear into the orc's head, but this is not enough to kill the orc, as he still has the strength to crush Kaori. With the Kaori defeated, the system tells Seo-yul that respawning is currently unavailable. Seo-yul pulls back with anger that the orc killed his labyrinth boss. In annoyance, he activates the Hall of Steel Trap. This rains arrows on the orc, and Seo-yul also uses the opportunity to cut the orc's leg with his spear. The orc crashes to the ground, and Seo-yul activates the spike ceiling trap, which immediately crushes the orc. It flattens the orc, and Seo-yul commends his ingenuity because he stacked all the traps in that area just in case the orc wanted to go rogue. Just then, he gets a warning, telling him that the labyrinth's durability has fallen to 72% and the labyrinth will automatically vanish once it reaches 60%. In addition, all monsters will be eliminated, and Seo-yul grabs his head in frustration because losing the boss was a huge hit to him. Nonetheless, he knows that he would have died if not for the labyrinth. Suddenly, the ground starts to shake, leaving him wondering what just happened. Before he knows it, the orc pushes his way through the floor, and he looks even more dangerous than before. The system then tells him that the orc is beginning its final struggle, and Seo-yul admits that the orc is strong. Since the labyrinth won't hold too much again, Seo-yul decides to return to the outside world because he believes that the association would have been evacuated. He plans to finish the orc once he has the free space to engage him. Meanwhile, Gunsu is walking around wondering where Seo-yul vanished. Suddenly, the gate opens right beside him, and before he even understands what is happening, he sees Seo-yul and the orc going at each other. While exchanging blows with the orc, Seo-yul notices something strange. He realizes that he is actually able to keep up with the orc, leaving him to wonder if it is because the orc is exhausted. However, he discards this thought when he realizes that his attacks are actually heavier than before. Even though the orc's attacks are heavier than before, he is able to tank them because his body feels different from how it used to, which means the 2 weeks of training weren't for nothing. In fact, he feels like he is being torn apart, but power continues shooting through his body, and he can sense the growth in his bones. Seo-yul dashes toward the orc, pushing his spear into him with a smile on his face because he is finally enjoying the battle. He hasn't finished thinking about this when the orc grabs his spear, and the moment he is restrained, he is slammed into a wall in the distance. Seo-yul coughs up blood while trying to pull himself together. He realizes that the orc actually took his weapon from him because he believes that he won't be able to pierce through his hardened blood without a weapon. Seo-yul commends the orc because he might look dull, but he is actually smart. Just then, Seo-yul turns around to see that the jawbone is sitting behind him, and an idea comes into his head. At the same time, Gunsu lunges at the orc, telling Seo-yul that he is going to buy him some time, so he should use the opportunity to get himself a weapon. Gunsu hasn't even finished his statement when the orc slams him into the ground. Seo-yul then dashes toward the orc, telling Gunsu that he has already found a weapon. Since the orc is concentrating on Gunsu at the moment, Seo-yul realizes that he has a chance. Seo-yul grabs the jawbone and knows that this is going to take every last bit of strength that he has. A burst of energy shoots through Seo-yul's body as he commandeers the jawbone. He pulls it open and releases the lever on Seo-yul's head. The jawbone claps the orc's head and decapitates him relatively easily. The orc's body crashes to the ground, and the system informs Seo-yul that he has acquired a unique grade item, the demonic dagger. Seo-yul thanks the orc because it is because of him that he finally solved the only thing that has been hindering him from going to the next stage of his training. With the orc defeated, Seo-yul walks over to where Gunsu is to get him to open his eyes because he is already losing consciousness. So-yul screams at him, telling him not to sleep, and this is enough to jerk Junsu back to life. So-yul teases him, telling him that he has 9 lives, and to Junsu, what he sees is an angel saving him. When he tells So-yul that he is the one, So-yul doesn't totally understand what he means by this, and he just teases him, telling him that there is no one who would look after him if not him. Nonetheless, So-yul urges Gunsu to chill out because it is all over. The next day, at the bureau headquarters, reporters and news agencies crowded the whole building. Not long after this, the director of Overcross, Yunwan, shows up, and all the attention immediately flows to him. The reporters ask him for a statement regarding what happened, while some ask him if he is admitting that the whole incident happened during an illegal monster transport. Junwan finally decides to make a statement, telling everyone that he would like to offer his apologies to the victims. He then tells them that the Steel Blood Orc is a monster of immense research value and they only brought it in because they wanted to donate it to the Bureau, despite the risks that were involved. Junwan then tells the reporters that he has no further comments while assuring them that he is going to fully cooperate with the monitoring department's investigation. Just then, one of the reporters spots So-yul in the back, and he calls everyone's attention to him. They rush over to him, demanding that he comment on the incident. They ask him how a D-rank hunter like him is able to take down an orc, but before he can say anything, his team leader drags him away, saying they have to work. Suddenly, one of the reporters makes a comment about how the Bureau is not giving an adequate response to what happened. He continues by saying the Bureau exists to monitor and coordinate with large guilds to prevent incidents like this. Since they are not able to do what is required of them, the dude says the Bureau is partially to blame. So-yul is pissed when he hears this, but his boss tells him to ignore the dude because he is just a YouTuber who took money from big guilds to post biased trash. So-yul's boss wants him to ignore the dude, but since they are playing every dirty trick in the book, So-yul decides to make his move. He walks up to the reporter, asking him if he is currently on a live broadcast, and the dude says yes, but wants to know why. So-yul replies that he wants everyone to hear what he has to say in real time, and he screams out loudly, asking him if he feels good when he gets paid to work for the big guilds. He points to Junwan, telling everyone that the Bureau is the one constantly cleaning up whatever messes they leave behind. This leaves everyone mute, and even Junwan couldn't say anything. So-yul's boss ends up dragging him away before he causes any more problems for them. Junwan then asks his assistant if So-yul is the same dude who was rude to him some time ago, and his assistant confirms this. This only gets Junwan angrier, and he tells his assistant, to do everything to crush So-yul. The next day, Lee-han is called to a meeting where he is informed that the YouTube video from yesterday has gone viral. Lee-han tells the officials that he doesn't think So-yul should be punished because there are other articles praising him too. However, Hyun Ki-hyuk, who is chief of the Bureau's monitoring department, believes that So-yul has to be punished. Lee-han disagrees, saying the punishment should go to Overcross or the people who were supposed to manage them. Hyun asks Lee-han if he is seriously suggesting that they are incompetent, and Lee-han lets him know that this is exactly what he means. Hyun almost loses his head in anger, but the elephant in the room urges them to chill out. The man then asks Lee-han if it is true that So-yul's rescue rate is 100%, and Lee-han says yes. Since this is the case, the man says So-yul is a talent that they cannot lose because even if they rely on the help of large guilds, they still have to maintain the dignity of the Bureau. Hyun then asks the strange, authoritative man if he has a plan, and he replies that since the guilds have decided to play funny, it is just right for them to play along. The man calmly takes a sip of tea while saying this, and it turns out that the man is Park Kwang-soo, who is the director of the Bureau. Later on, So-yul gets an invite from the director, and he heads to the man's office to see him. Upon entering, Kwang-soo tells him to take his seat because they have something to discuss. Kwang-soo brews a tea for them, and after serving the tea, he asks So-yul how it tastes. So-yul teases the old man, telling him that the tea is so good that he should consider opening a cafe. Kwang-soo is glad to hear this, and he asks So-yul what rank he thinks he is going to get now if he retakes the test. So-yul replies that he can't say for sure, but he is confident that it won't be his current rank. Kwang-soo agrees with him, saying he has lately achieved things that no D rank could ever achieve. However, Kwang-soo lets him know that things are difficult on their own part too, because people are trying to dig up dirt on him. Deep down, So-yul is already worried because he doesn't know where the director is going with all of this. He wonders if he is trying to get him to spill his secrets because he is helping him. Basically, Kwang-soo is a veteran in politics, which is why he has been able to hold his current position for a long time. Before coming to the office, Lee-han had told So-yul to just speak honestly in front of Kwang-soo and not to try to play games because it might end up hurting him. So-yul knows he has always followed Lee-han's advice up to that present moment, but he doesn't think it is wise of him to mention the labyrinth. Just then, Kwang-soo tells him to chill out because he is not going to ask him how he became strong, yet. Kwang-soo tells Seo-yul that what matters most at that moment is that the bureau needs his power, and without beating around the bush, he tells Seo-yul that he is sending him to the countryside. At the same time, Junwan has just been discharged after he was informed that the investigation is over. Junwan thanks his liaison, Siwoo, and he asks him what he thinks of Seo-yul. Siwoo says he doesn't know because they are in different departments, and he asks him why he cares so much about a mere rescue worker. Junwan angrily replies that Seo-yul is a pest who is getting on his nerves. Siwoo then asks Junwan if it is because of his hatred for the dude that he has decided to kick him to the countryside. Junwan urges Siwoo to watch his mouth while saying he just wants Seo-yul to have a reflection of himself. They are in the middle of this discussion when Seo-yul appears behind them, asking them if they are close or something. Junwan tries to act cool, telling Seo-yul that it appears that fate keeps bringing them together. Yunwan tells Seo-yul that he heard the news of Seo-yul being sent to the countryside. Seo-yul picks his ear and blows it off, while casually telling Junwan that even though the official notice is not out yet, but he already knows that. Seo-yul teases him, asking him if he is stalking him or something, but he urges Yunwan not to worry about him because it's just a 6-month dispatch. Junwan mocks Seo-yul, saying he is quite the optimist because, from what he heard, the bureau only dispatches those at the department head level or higher, so it doesn't really look like a dispatch. Junwan is still talking trash when Seo-yul cuts in, telling him that even his spy, Siwoo, doesn't know the important news yet. Seo-yul admits that he was going to wait before announcing it to everyone, but he decides to tell them. He reveals that as of that day, he has been promoted from 8th grade to 6th grade, which means he is now a senior officer, thanks to the double promotion. Siwoo and Junwan are shocked to hear this, and Seo-yul quickly teases Junwan, telling him that he doesn't look really happy about his promotion. Junwan swallows the hard pill, saying he is happy for him, but he is wondering if the bureau just hands out promotions without one being qualified for it. Seo-yul replies that this only means that the bureau is interested in keeping talents, and he is pretty sure that he is pissed that things didn't go his way. This triggers Junwan, who unleashes his aura, aiming to overwhelm Seo-yul, but Seo-yul replies to the threat accordingly. Siwoo is forced to step in, telling Junwan that it is time for him to leave. Junwan apologizes, saying he only spaced out and would like to be on his way. As he leaves, Seo-yul tells him that he has a piece of advice for him. Seo-yul tells Junwan that trying to break him by changing his location was a big mistake because no matter where they send him, his job as a rescue hunter doesn't change. Seo-yul says this with confidence as he walks away, and Junwan finally loses his cool, punching the wall really hard. It turns out that during the meeting with Kwang-soo, he had told Seo-yul that he didn't have to worry about the dispatch. He tells him that on the surface it looks like a demotion or an exile, but it is nothing other than a 6-month dispatch. However, Seo-yul would have to show results while he is there, which is the only way to keep the outsiders from touching him. In the course of the meeting, Kwang-soo notices that Seo-yul is spaced out, and he calls his attention back to reality. Seo-yul apologizes before thanking the director for looking out for him. However, he lets him know that he has one request, and he reveals that since he is heading to the countryside, he wants the director to send him to somewhere that actually needs his help. Kwang-soo is blown away when he hears this because he wasn't expecting that from him in such a situation. Kwang-soo has no choice but to admit that the dude is something else. Later on, the rest of Seo-yul's colleagues hear that he has become a senior officer, and this shocks the hell out of them. They ask Lee-han if he knows about it, and he replies that he knows because he is the department head after all. They ask Lee-han how they are supposed to handle rescues without Seo-yul, and Lee-han replies that they just have to do their jobs as usual. Since Seo-yul has 1 week before leaving, Lee-han suggests that they call him if he's going to be coming to the team's dinner that is taking place that night. The yellowhead decides to try his luck, and he reaches out to Seo-yul. Surprisingly, he picks up the call, but Seo-yul tells him that he is onto something at that moment. The dude asks him what it is, and Seo-yul replies that he is clearing out a wasp nest. It turns out that Seo-yul has finally made his way to the dungeon to complete the mission he was given, which has just 72 hours left on the clock. Failure to complete this mission will reduce combat effectiveness against insect-type monsters by 50%. After dropping the call, Seo-yul stares at the queen's nest and realizes that she is releasing a ton of monsters, but Seo-yul is not essentially worried about this since he can still move. Seo-yul makes his move, dashing into the distance with the aim of killing the queen. Suddenly he is cut off by insect monsters known as sweepfits, forcing Seo-yul to engage them. He realizes that the queen had made a ton of monsters lying in wait for him. These sweepfits fire their stingers like bullets, but because they take a lot of energy to create, the queen usually doesn't go straight for this option. Seo-yul wonders if the queen already had them ready in the first place. Nonetheless, he doesn't think he has any time to waste because he is just going to find himself surrounded in the end. However, before that happens, Seo-yul opens the labyrinth, sucking in the insect monsters so he can handle them with his labyrinth traps. With the labyrinth open, he believes he can easily reach the nest, but suddenly, the insect monsters change their pattern. Soyul is confused when he sees this, as he wonders if they are changing up to avoid getting dragged into the sphere. They are basically flying low, which indicates that they might be avoiding the sphere's pull. With everything the monsters have been pulling off so far, Soyul figures out that the queen monster has been watching him and taking notes. Instead of being pissed, Soyul is actually honored that the queen is using the tiny brain power that she has just to kill him. Nonetheless, Soyul has his own plan too. Since he can't respawn labyrinth monsters at the moment, he has no choice but to enter the labyrinth. He plans to pull in the number of monsters he can before escaping as fast as he can. Once he has direct access to the queen, he teases her, telling her to come outside and stop hiding. Suddenly, he notices that the queen's pheromones are going crazy, which means she is doing something worth knowing. He wonders if she is trying to call the rest of the swarm, and just to be safe, he activates his sixth sense. Fortunately for him, he activated this at the right time just to dodge an attack that was meant for him. It turns out that the queen was calling for a powerful soldier she had made before, which is considered the queen's ultimate weapon, and this insect monster is known as Winglash. The Winglash forces Soyul to turn in the opposite direction to start running. Soyul finally realizes just how desperate the queen is to stop him because she created a strong beast because of him. Soyul then runs towards the sphere so he can trap the Winglash, leaving the queen open. Just as he wanted, the sphere grabs the Winglash, keeping it in place. While the sphere is trying to drag the Winglash into the labyrinth, Soyul goes after the defenseless queen. Suddenly he notices that the Winglash is onto him again. He manages to turn around just in time to block the monster's attack. The Winglash knocks him to the ground, and this is when Soyul realizes that the beast actually tore off his own arm just to escape the pull of the sphere. While the Winglash is holding him down, the queen is providing encouragement. Realizing just how stubborn the two are, Soyul decides to pull all of them into the labyrinth. Even though things didn't go as he wanted, he is not worried because the two are now trapped in his domain. Soyul teases them, telling them not to move if they like themselves. He's about to start explaining why they shouldn't move when he realizes that he is speaking to monsters, and this makes him sound like a crazy person. Soyul then goes into his inventory to activate the trap, Steel Rain. This unleashes a ton of arrows from the front, but the Winglash deflects everything with his wings. Soyul is impressed by this because he finally understands why the monster is called Winglash. However, Winglash is not safe yet because the arrows aren't just coming from one direction. Before the monster knows what is happening, it is torn apart from behind by a bunch of arrows flying toward it. Soyul then reminds the queen that he already told her that all of her efforts are going to be in vain the moment they step into his domain, because he already packed the place with traps just to deal with monsters like her. Now that her ultimate weapon is gone, they are the only ones left. Soyul prepares to attack the queen, but he knows that her armor is strong enough to deflect his spear, so he doesn't have to waste his time trying to poke it. Soyul changes direction to try to get a soft spot where he can destroy the queen from. However, the queen still blocks his attack from this direction, pushing him backwards. Soyul is surprised that the queen is trying her best not to go down easily. Even though he has 3 days left for the quest, he still wants to finish everything right there and then. In addition, if he leaves the labyrinth just because he has time on his hands, it is just going to make it look like he is running away from the queen. Soyul then activates a trapdoor that shatters some of the queen's limbs. Soyul then prepares to attack the queen with a powerful martial skill. This is the first time he's going to use the skill, but he doesn't mind because it is going to be against the queen, which is pretty good. With the queen totally open and unable to move, Soyul dashes toward her with the Crimson Lotus skill that unleashes a massive energy, leaving a big hole in the queen. With this, the queen is defeated, and Soyul gets a congratulatory message telling him that he has defeated the queen. Soyul is left panting from the amount of energy he expended in using the skill. He suffers a burn in his hand, and staring at this, he realizes just how weak he has been up to that point, but he believes that there is no more running away from him. The system then informs him that the quest reward has been sent to his inventory. Soyul decides to check out the rewards, and he realizes that he has been given a poison stinger, which is a rare item. It has a unique effect that allows it to paralyze monsters of 2 stars or below. However, the effectiveness of this drops significantly for monsters that are 3 stars and above. Soyul realizes that this is something he can use in certain situations. However, the other reward is what concerns Soyul the most. The other reward is the Queen's Royal Jelly, which is also rare. It has a single use, and upon consumption, it alters one's constitution to drastically increase mana sensitivity, but there are side effects. Soyul remembers that activating a trap consumes a lot of mana, so it is common sense to increase his mana. Soyul then bites down on the royal jelly, consuming it all at once. This immediately releases condensed mana into his body. The mana is so overwhelming that it is trying to force itself out, but Soyul is not about to allow this, since he worked hard to get it in the first place. Soyul figures out that he has to circulate the mana's flow with his breathing as much as he can, so he can force the blood vessels to accept the true chi. By doing this, Soyul is able to calm the monostorm and the system congratulates him, telling him that he has transformed into a special constitution, the Myriad Soul's Peach Blossom physique. Soyul realizes that his bodily senses have increased, and he is pleased by this because it is all from a single piece of royal jelly. Soyul checks out his stats and realizes that he has increased a whole lot. Soyul is glad because he is reaping the rewards of putting his life on the line. However, he remembers that there are side effects. Instead of trying to find out what they are, Soyul decides to just ignore it, saying he is going to think about it later because the main event is just about to start, and this is the incorporation of labyrinth monsters. Soyul realizes that only a few red goblins are left in the labyrinth, and no matter how strong he thinks he is, he can't take on certain monsters all by himself, which is why he needs to restock. He stores up eggs, and just then the system tells him that a beehive is treated as a single entity, and the system recommends that he install the Lake of Decay. This is a new trap that is unlocked by defeating the queen. If Soyul submerges the corpse of a monster or awakened in the lake, the corpse's experience points or traits are transferred to a designated labyrinth monster. This means if he targets the Lake of Decay's effect on the beehive, all the eggs in there will grow stronger at once. Without wasting time, Soyul proceeds with this, and he is left to decide which of them he is supposed to make the boss monster. Soyul finds his choice, and it is one that is bigger than the others. Soyul smiles as he names the boss Vespa, while promising to bring him nice treats. Later on, Soyul meets for a night out at the request of Jeonghye. However, Soyul and his colleague have gotten there before her. The dude asks Soyul what he is up to, and he replies that he is spending the rest of his time getting food for the guy he is raising. The dude has no idea what he is saying, and he asks him if he is raising some sort of exotic pet. It turns out that Soyul had gone to retake the rank test because the director asked for it. His colleague considers him a weirdo because others would have spent their time off on vacations and the like. Just then, the dude mentions that the women are staring at Soyul, and he quickly rides the wave to talk about how handsome he is. Moments later, Jeonghye shows up and Soyul is still trashing her for coming late when he realizes that her nose is bleeding.